Hey, welcome to another episode of Tell Me How You're Mighty, Infidelity Survival Stories. I'm Tracy Shorn, otherwise known as Chump Lady, and I'm here with my co-host Sarah Gorel. And our guest today is psychotherapist and author Vikki Stark. And Vikki is the author of Runaway Husbands, The Abandoned Wife's Guide to Recovery and Renewal. Welcome, Vikki. Hey.
Hi, I'm delighted to be here.
Yeah. Can you tell us a bit about how you came to focus on this community? Because you have your own ghost story, I guess.
Yeah, it's a doozy. So basically, I have been a family therapist and a divorce counselor. I had been at the time for over 25 years. So I had a lot of experience, sort of working with people around issues of divorce and couple counseling and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
And I had written my first book, which is called My Sister, Myself, about sister relationships. And I had spent 23 days on the road on a book tour. Now, at that point, I'd been married to my adorable husband for 21 years. And I thought we had a really rock solid bond. And he never gave me any peep to tell me anything otherwise. He was always very loving, and we couldn't walk down the street without him holding my hand. And he was just, totally there as a husband. And I never thought that there was any trouble in paradise. So I spent these 23 days on the road, and every night I would call him and he would give me support because I was out there alone going from hotel to bookstore to bookstore to hotel. And he would give me all this support. And then finally, at the end of 23 days, I flew home. I took the red eye from San Diego, California to Montreal, arrived in the morning, and he picked me up at the airport and drove me home. And then he went off to work. And I thought, this is weird. Like, usually we would sit and have a coffee and he'd want to connect because he was big on connecting. But he went off to work and I stayed home and puttered around, unpacking and everything. And one thing I noticed was that in my kitchen, everything was in the wrong place. So I'm thinking, why did he put the spatula over there? He knows it goes over here. We lived there 9 years. And the colander, it's not up where it should be. It's down in the bottom. Like, why did he suddenly put he knows how to do this. So I didn't think anything of it. And then I took a shower and I see this long dark hair. Notice how short my hair is in the bathtub. And again, I'm like, who knows, I didn't think anything of it. And then he came home that night and he came into the kitchen and I threaded my arm through his and I said, I bought fish. And he said, it's over. And I said, oh, okay. If you don't want fish, I think we have chicken. And he said, no, it's over. And I'm leaving you. And I'm moving in with my girlfriend. And that was the first breath that I learned that there was trouble in paradise. And then he actually did throw all of his stuff into garbage bags and moved in with his girlfriend, whom he'd been involved with on and off for 6 years.
That is terrifying. So all this has been going on, no signs, this perfect.
No signs. No signs.
No hair in the shower.
Signs. And then I learned that during the 23 days, the girlfriend was in my house.
Of course she was. Yeah.
Yeah. So I totally, fell down the well. And I was trying to understand, how is this possible?
Yeah.
Somebody who seems to be a loving, devoted, engaged husband could morph overnight into an angry stranger, because not only did he leave, but he then turned on me and his eyes turned cold and he seemed to have no regard for me. He was not interested in talking about anything and he had no regard for my suffering. And not only that, he sort of went after me in the legal process. And I just, where did my husband go?
It's like one of those films where someone that looks human suddenly reveals themselves to be an alien. And it's absolutely terrifying.
Yes. Yeah, you're so right, Sarah. And the title of the first chapter of my book, which I'm going to show you, yeah, here it is. My husband the hologram?
Yeah, yeah.
Because it looked like him, but it wasn't him.
Yeah.
So anyhow, long story short, so then I started researching and found out nothing was written about this sudden abandonment issue.
Yeah.
And then I started interviewing women and sent out questionnaires. And in the end, I heard from 400 women across the world who had had very, very similar experiences. And it was eerily similar, from the words that the men said when they walked away to how they all turned on the wife and blamed her and said, I never loved you. And she's like, what? We've been married 37 years. You told me you loved me every day, and how he rewrites history.
Mm-hmm.
And how she then falls into this terrible, terrible state and then has to crawl her way out of it, and not only make meaning out of her future, but also make meaning out of her past. Because he denigrates the whole marriage. This is a very common thing in wife abandonment. It's one of the hallmarks of wife abandonment syndrome. He denigrates the whole marriage. And he says, that time we went to California, and she said, yes, didn't we have a great time? And he said, I hated it. I was miserable every minute. And she's like, whoa, wait a minute. That doesn't match up with my reality. So it's a big piece of work. And that's how I came to write Runaway Husbands. And that's how I developed, as a result of that, my website, runawayhusbands.com, and this worldwide community of women supporting women who are going through this crisis.
I'm curious, as a therapist, you must have heard these stories in your practice for the 20 some odd years you were doing this before it happened to you. And then you have like a whole new chapter of your career as a result of this. I mean, can you tell me how as a therapist, how your thinking shifted? Because you didn't find anything in the resources that spoke to your experience. So you had to write that book. And in that sense, I can relate. I did something similar, but can you, how did your you must have thought, oh, I should be equipped with the skills to understand this. And it's not understandable.
Right. I mean, it's interesting you say that, because I never actually thought during all of those years, if I'd worked with somebody, a couple, or with a woman who was going through this, maybe not anything as dramatic, but it's interesting what you're saying, because all of the women go to therapy, they all go to therapy, and most therapists don't get it.
Yeah.
So the woman is grieving and in such mortal pain. And the therapist is, tell me about your childhood.
Yeah.
Do you have attachment issues? And a lot of therapists don't understand that it is possible for a man to keep his plans very close to the vest. Nobody knows what's going on until the moment it suits him and it works for him. And in 99% of the cases, there's another woman, and he leaves with the support of the other woman, and the wife is devastated. And it's not because, like myself, I didn't have attachment issues. It wasn't, it's not because of some flaw in the woman, but many therapists, they can't believe that, first of all, this is possible. A lot of people say it takes two to tango.
Sure.
And I'm not saying that the women in my community were perfect wives, and I certainly wasn't, but I did deserve to hear a little heads up, that I'm thinking of leaving.
Well, you didn't deserve to be cheated on. I mean, this man stole 6 years of your life, of your reality that you know of. I mean, to be that deceitful, God knows what he's up to.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So that's one of the problems, which is that a lot of times when women go to therapy, then they feel like the therapist is sort of blaming them. Like, what did you do that caused him, or why are you suffering so much? You should be over it by now. It's like a year. And this kind of betrayal of this magnitude, it doesn't just take a year. It takes a long period of time to rebuild your sense of trust, not only in men or in intimate partners, but in the world in general.
Yeah.
I just think you must question everything. If someone's sort of taken away your whole reality, your foundations, your history, and has rewritten it, then there must be an element of you that thinks, well, what is real? What isn't real? Is it his reality, my reality? And how do you build a future when someone's taken away your past?
Yeah, exactly, Sarah. I mean, and that's really the most profound trauma of all, is this destruction of your sense of reality. And the interesting thing is that as I've worked over the years with thousands of women, to whom this has happened, one of the things that always amazes me is that I run a lot of groups and retreats and stuff like that. And I'm in the group and I'm looking at the 8 women on my screen or in the room. And I'm like, these are the most amazing women. Oh my God, they're so great.
Yeah.
They're so smart. They're so accomplished. And mostly they're so caring. I don't ever have to worry when I go on a retreat, that I'm the only one in charge, because they're all helping each other and making things easier for everybody. And so part of the issue is that the women to whom this happens tend to be caregivers. So these are the women who gave up their career to support his medical degree, his medical education, or who moved from state to state to state for his job. And cheerfully, happily, anything for him. And so these are not the kind of women who are going to stand up for themselves and say, no, I don't want to move to Arkansas, even though you got a job there, and are going to stand up. No, they're going to be always facilitating the life of the husband. And so when he leaves, he looks at her and she's like devastated and doesn't want him to go. And he's like, wait a minute, I thought you wanted me to be happy.
Yeah, right. Because his entitlement is natural.
Yeah, I thought, that you were devoted to my happiness. And now why are you making this hard for me? I don't get it. I'm the victim here.
Right. Well, I call it being a spousal appliance. You're appliance and, you're past your sell-by date now and, you're obsolete and it's time for a new appliance. You've been very useful. I mean, do you apologize or say thank you to your washing machine when it dies? I mean, like it's goodbye. I mean, you have to be so shallow and so sociopathic to be this way. Where I thought you were going with, these wonderful people on your retreats is that these people choose really well for themselves. Mm-hmm. I mean, in a weird, inverted kind of way, it's a sort of a compliment. They're not accepting, lower tier people. Mm-hmm. They're choosing people who are going to give 150%. Who will accept.
You mean the men are choosing?
The men, yeah,
yes.
Abandoners or narcissist or whatever you want to call them. I mean, these entitled people who, in the community I do, cheaters. I look at both sides, men and women.
Yes,
but I think they pick very well.
They do though, Tracy, but they pick well originally. And it's like if you bring in the washing machine analogy, they get a high quality appliance to start off with, but quite often they downgrade to a lower quality. It might be a younger appliance, but it's not such a good one. And then their life unfolds. So what I don't understand is that they have, these incredible people in their lives who do everything for them. And then they think that they can find something better elsewhere. And inevitably, most of the time, they don't.
Yeah, I mean, this is so true because my demographic, typically in the Runaway Husbands community, the typical age is like 53. So we definitely have younger women, who've been married for 4 or 6 or 8 years and have a 2-year-old or something. But most of the women are in either middle age or a little bit older. And so what happens with the men is that the women, and see, this is very interesting that my husband left when I was on my book tour.
Yeah.
I had published my first book. And it was published by McGraw-Hill. It's in New York City, it's a reputable publisher. And I was on the ascendant, in my career. I was in my late 50s. I was on the ascendant in my career. And he was a professor, but maybe he felt as though he's getting older, and what was there to look forward to, and that I was maybe outshining him a little bit.
Yeah.
And I didn't think it was a coincidence that the day that I came back to Montreal was 3 days before my book launch, which was taking place here in Montreal with all the press and all of the women from the Sisters book. I had dozens of women who I had interviewed in the Sisters book coming to this beautiful event, like the high point of my life, right? My first book publishing with all my friends, family, and everybody. He left on a Tuesday and that was on a Friday. So I don't think that's a coincidence that he couldn't tolerate me stealing the thunder, and that he had stayed for 6 years. And you know why? Because I'm such a good wife.
Yeah, you're a good appliance.
I'm a good wife, and it's very hard to leave, when you feel as though I'm going to be giving up somebody who was really, a very, a very competent washing machine. But when I had the book launch and I had a lot of attention, I think it was too much for him, and that was the straw that broke the camel's back.
Well, and he had the girlfriend. I mean, to me, it sounds like sabotage. Like he chose his moment. As you said, it wasn't a coincidence, and the cruelty in that, to choose that moment of all moments to completely destabilize you. It's unforgivable. I mean, there's a level of sadism to it, I think.
But I did that book launch. And the press was there and everything. And I look at photographs of myself with my eyes sort of glazed. But I said, I'm not going to let him take this away from me.
Good.
Screw this. I am doing this. It's going forward. Nobody's going to know. And I am going to have my night. And I did. And I want to respond to something, Sarah, that you introduced, which is that, with the women in my community, I often ask them, who was the affair partner? And typically, it's very, very interesting. First of all, you would assume that the affair partner would be some gorgeous, sexy babe, with some great body and, younger and all of that stuff. But no, very often the affair partner is somebody from the office, so there's the opportunity for them to meet each other. But where he's the boss and she's the receptionist or something, something like that. Or he's in the gym and she's the trainer. Or she's the yoga instructor. In one case, she was the kid's babysitter.
Yeah, that's a common story.
And very often the affair partner is younger, but is not as accomplished as a wife. And so that she can sort of look up to him and say, oh, tell me all your stories. And wow, you're so amazing. And he gets that boost that he needs, that ego boost, which you're not going to get from a wife that you've been sleeping with for 25 years, who's heard all your stories and, may love you very much, but is, knows all your shit. And so the affair partner, and often she's not like when I look at the woman that my husband left me for, and she is an accomplished woman, she was his student. He was the professor, right?
Oh, cliche. Wow.
Typical. But in terms of looks and stuff like that, people say, I can't believe he left me for her. So it's not what one would typically assume, that a man is going to leave his wife of decades for somebody who doesn't seem to have a lot of attraction.
I think it sounds as if you were a very accomplished washing machine appliance and wife appliance.
It was.
Maybe you were failing in the unquestioning ego massage department, which it seems is possibly what they head off for. That sort of unquestioning adoration, recreating themselves as someone magnificent, which you'll never be with somebody who you've been with for 25 years.
Well, one thing I say to the women, typically, you have certain things you say over and over. And this is one thing I always say, is that she has something you'll never have. She's new. And so you can never be new. And so that is, it's different for men than it is for women. And when my husband left, I did not have self-doubt. Rather than feel like, what's wrong with me, that he's leaving me, I felt like, what's wrong with him? Why is he leaving me? But many, or let's say most of the women in my community, when their husbands leave, they feel that there's something wrong with them. And and it breaks my heart, rather than feel like he's going through his identity crisis. This is an identity issue for him. And I knew very clearly was for my husband, that he was approaching 60. Or was he 60? He was approaching 60. And he's looking ahead and saying, I've been a good husband. I've been a good father. I've been a good worker. I've been a good son. When do I get to be James Bond? And so he was going through his identity crisis, and the girlfriend gave him the spark and the excitement that made him feel alive and made him feel he wasn't losing it sexually, nothing like an affair to turn you on.
For 6 years, 6 years of deception.
Well, it was on and off. In the middle, he had a liver transplant, so he was busy during that year. But
wow.
So they get to very often men in midlife get to a certain point and they look ahead and they don't know what there is for them. And so it's an identity crisis for themselves where they need the boost. But the sad thing is that the wife, but since he turns on her, and just as you were saying, Sarah, that he can then say, you weren't good enough. Not like he was so perfect and stellar. But he says to her, I'm leaving you because you weren't good enough. He could never say, I'm leaving you because I don't know, I'm lost and I'm looking for something else in life. He'll never say that. But he turns it on her. And because she's been such a trusting partner, she's trusted everything he has to say. My husband was like the moral authority. He was a political scientist, and what he said about the world, I thought, well, he really knows. He was the moral authority. And in many of our relationships in the runaway husband community, the women look up at their husbands, are very assertive and very sure of themselves and, know what they think. And the women always turn to them to say, what do you think? And now when he's saying something negative about her, she can't break that pattern of believing his words. So it brings her down. It totally brings her down. And that's one of the biggest challenges of recovery, is recognizing, hey, you're an innocent bystander in a drama that's going on in this guy's life. And yes, you might not have been the most attentive or sexiest wife in the world, but you didn't deserve this.
This really strikes me, though, Tracy, is this is what your blog is all about. And actually, one of the questions that's come in on the internet is, it says, I've read both Vikki and Tracy's books. What stood out is how the cheater and the runaway husbands justify themselves. And what you're both doing is really changing the narrative, shifting the blame from the person that has been abused to the person that is behaving in this appalling fashion.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. I would say about, Vikki, to your point about that these people turn on them and say, I did this because of you, because something's lacking. You didn't do this and you failed to do that. It's such an insult to injury. And what I tell people, what I find helpful is to go look at their behavior. Someone who can just walk out on a 20+ year marriage, who's that shallow, who's that deceitful, is this someone you can respect? Do you share values with this person? I know you've given them, through love and shared history, this huge opinion of you, but why would you trust what a fuckwit says about your self-worth? This is not somebody, this is not the Nobel Prize Committee rejecting you.
Yes.
This is a wandering dick that is rejecting you. And I mean, I ridicule and I snark, but I mean, I really mean it too. I mean, you've got to kind of liberate your mind from caring what they think of you, because look at how they've behaved. You brought your A game. You were loving and you were invested and you are top shelf, and nobody's perfect and everybody has flaws. But if you came and you were committed and you brought your A game, yeah, what could they say? What could they say to shake you?
Yeah. No, exactly.
And how can these people, he was obviously an intelligent man, a professor. How can they not see how ludicrous it is at nearly 60 to be trying to reinvent yourself with a much younger partner? I mean, can they not see that other people will be looking on and not seeing them as James Bond, but as a slightly sad individual?
Well, you know what? I think that self-reflection isn't high on the list of the characters that we're talking about. And the other thing that they don't also project is the destruction that it does to the family.
Yeah.
So, and I just want to touch on that briefly because it's a huge topic in my community. that many of the women that I work with have adult children. And when the husband walks out with a girl who's 3 years older than his daughter, that does a tremendous amount of damage. And even if she's an appropriate age, it does a tremendous amount of damage, because the adult children look at him and say, you taught me to be honest. You taught me not to cheat, and now you're doing this. And so that for a lot of the adult children, their relationship with the father gets, if not disrupted, it can even get, finished, that they become estranged. And that's another tragedy of all this. They look at the mother, who is clearly the injured party. The father, meanwhile, is in a state of limerence, like he's elated. He's like so excited, and he's buying all the, the gym clothes and, buy the car and all of that stuff. He's in another state of mind. And so it's so easy for the adult children to see the mother, who's now, and this happens, I lost 30 pounds at the time. I was like emaciated when after he left, and everyone loses weight. People don't eat for some reason, they lose weight. And so they can look at the mother and see how devastated she is and how thrilled he is. And he can't wait to introduce his new girlfriend to the family. And the adult children are holding their nose and saying, I don't want anything of this. And then the father turns to the mother and said, you poisoned their mind against me.
Yeah, right. They're very common.
As if they're blind and they can't see what's going on and make their own decisions. They're 23 years old or 20 or 33 years old. And so this is another side, a collateral damage that's a very, very destructive and terrible. And then the adult children go through all this soul searching, and he was a good father. He might be a very good father, a loving father, a caring father who's interested in his children, but they observe the kind of man that he is, and they don't know how to, put a square peg in a round hole. How do you love the father who's going to be your loving father, while at the same time you despise the behavior of the man? And that's a huge thing.
It's package deal.
Yeah.
It's mental gymnastics. Where I thought you were going, and I see this on Chump Lady often, is that the devastated party, the injured party, you're not fun. You're not bringing sparkles to the table. And maybe it's more common with teenagers or, certain young adults. Mr. Sparkles there with a happy new life can kind of buy the attention. And who would you rather be around, a happy person or a sad person? And oftentimes the left behind parent gets blamed for their grief, and get over it. Dad's moved on. I mean, a lot of that entitlement that you are feeding them, that they are the most important person and they have the most important career or whatever it is, you're modeled to your children. So dad is the most important thing. He's happy. We should all be happy.
Yeah. And for adult children, it's very painful if they do want to keep a relationship with their father and maybe with a new wife whom they like. And then the mother is betrayed by her children.
Yeah.
And the children don't want to betray the mother, but, it's not only materialistic, but they love their father.
Sure.
And so, yes, sometimes the father is taking them on great vacations and they're all having a blast when they're together. And then they come home to mother in the dark room under the covers, and you're right, it's a tremendous burden for them. And also because the recovery takes so long. It's a good, strong year, at least for most women. And sometimes it's quite a bit longer than that. And so that's a tremendous burden for the adult children to have to worry about mom. And also, on the one hand, worry about her, and on the other hand, be frustrated, like, okay, mom, it's enough already.
Yeah. Well,
what strikes me as well is when you've been abandoned in this way and it's come out of nowhere, and it just undermines everything that you believe in. How do you spot these individuals and stop getting involved in them again? So if you've been involved in one once, how do you get involved in another, not just a relationship, but friendships, anything involving human interaction when you have been so badly treated? How do you learn to trust anyone else again? And how do you reassure yourself that you're not involved with another similar individual?
It's a great question. And every single woman thousands of women in my community, everyone gets to that question. And I actually do have an answer for it. First of all, that first relationship that you had, and I have a woman in my community who was married for 50 years at the point that he left. So it's her whole adult life, right? And for many of the women, it's 30, 40, 20, 30, 40 years. It's a huge chunk of their life. But you're never going to have another relationship like that relationship, because now you know what's possible. So where we all went into, like when I met my husband, oh my God, I fell in love, like, there were fireworks. I mean, I was so in love. A subsequent relationship, hopefully you're going to go into it with your eyes open and maybe develop a friendship, get to know the person, and also look at what happened before. So if it's a midlife relationship and he had a previous marriage, which is not unusual, and this is going to be a second marriage, what happened in the previous marriage? Does he talk about his wife and call her a stupid cow? Does he call her names? Is he mean about his ex-wife? Well, that gives you a little picture of, wait a minute, just be a little careful. But that hopefully in the second relationship, important relationship, and I'm sort of focusing not so much on friends, but on, intimate relationships, you're going to love yourself first. And you're going to take care of yourself first. And you're never going to be devastated to the point that you're devastated now, because even if you don't see it coming, it's possible. And you're going to be walking into things with your eyes open, hopefully, ideally, hopefully, so that you can have a subsequent relationship where there are no guarantees in any relationship, right? There's no guarantees, but you'd rather be open enough to welcome in another companion if that's what you want. Some women say, not for me, and that's perfectly fine. But if you want to have a companion, to be open enough to welcome somebody in and have the risk and face the risk, then to shut the door and say never again, but then maybe feel as though you're missing something that you would like to have in your life.
Yeah. You can. I have another question for you. How do we change the stigma that it's not the wife's fault when a husband abandons? Can you talk about the stigma these women feel for, it's one thing for your husband to pronounce you damaged goods, but do other people perceive you that way too?
Yeah. Well, I mean, that would probably be for the older cohort. That's a concept that maybe is, we talked about past its due date. I think for the younger women who are in their 30s and 40s, maybe it's not so much of a stigma. And it also depends on the cultural community that they come from.
Yeah.
For somebody who comes from Sri Lanka, or from different, like I'm working with somebody. So different cultures, the community really looks down on a woman who can't keep her man.
Yeah.
And that's but I think that's becoming more of an old-fashioned idea. Nevertheless, it's all part of the emotional hit that you take, and particularly if you have that belief, that it is the woman's fault. If a man strays, that it's the woman's fault that she couldn't hang on to him, or that there's something wrong with her. And that's part of building yourself up, that you're not going to you're not going to listen to those messages coming from the community if they exist.
Well, it is a loss of status. I mean, I think whether or not you believe you caused, him to wander, I think there is a stigma that single women, especially single women of a certain age, feel for, what Sarah, you encountered this walking the dog, right? Oh, those single mothers, it's out there.
Yes. No. I mean, Tracy, you guys are hitting on all of the pain points that the women in my community deal with. And that tremendous loss of status, to be a 50-year-old woman and be single, in some way, it's embarrassing. And, one woman that I work with, she and her husband were part of this whole community of expats who came from another country, and they all lived together in this town somewhere, I don't know, in America. And their whole social network were couples, and then he leaves and with a girlfriend that he's bringing into the community, and now they're a couple, so they're invited to the dinner parties, and she's single, and like, where does she go? And sometimes they take pity on her and they'll take her out, but that she, it's different if you're living in New York City, and there's lots of single women around, but in certain communities or settings like that, that status thing is huge, and it plays in our own minds. It's not only what the culture is saying, but it plays in our own minds that we were like, oh yeah, I'm married, I'm all set up, I'm good, I'm fine. And then when he takes himself away and you're like, I'm this sad, middle-aged single woman with no place to go on a Saturday night. And that's why the groups of women and traveling, like doing women's tours of, whatever, there's all of these resources that are available if you have the nerve to go to a meetup group and do, I don't know, learn French or something, learn something new in a group. If you have the guts to go out and do that, you can rebuild your life as a single person, and that's what you have to do.
Yeah.
But you're having to do so much, cope with the loss of your relationship, but rebuild a whole new friendship group. And something else someone raised as well was the idea that these people are quite often people pleasers. So they're very good at getting people on side. So I suppose in some cases it might be quite difficult for friends to retain loyalty when this person is coming across as very charismatic, very lovely, a real people pleaser, good at getting people on side.
These people meaning the husbands.
Yeah, the abandonment.
Yeah, but that's the covert narcissist element. That very often, like my husband, like a very, well, would I call him sweet? Maybe not so much, but a lot of the husbands are very sweet people, devoted, the hockey coach, they're involved in the community. Everybody loves George, and so they look at him and they say, like, how could he possibly do anything wrong? But that's the covert narcissist thing, that he does, you're so right, like he does want people to like him, and he does want to appear to be the pillar of the community. But when it no longer suits him to be with, wife number one, then he has no problem catapulting into another relationship, but still maintaining that wish that people are going to look at him in this positive way. And that is another thing that the wives have to deal with, which is that they're going to, people say everyone's going to believe George, his story, that I wasn't there for him, or that I was not, I was too involved in my career, or whatever it is George is selling out there, that the public is buying.
Well, those public aren't your friends. I mean, we call those the Switzerland friends or the Switzerland people. I mean, you have to work hard not to let that in your head, and take it as an article of faith that those people don't know you. And if they believe that, then you cull your social register accordingly. They're not in your life.
Yes, exactly. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And that losing friends is like, sometimes it's even more painful than the husband leaving.
Sure.
The friends that took sides, or say, I'm not taking any sides, but I invited your ex-husband and his girlfriend to dinner last week.
We're well aware of that. But Sarah, it sounds like you didn't have that. It sounds like everybody kind of rallied in your situation.
No, but I think it was because I was kind of always the one that organized it. He was generally found lounging on the sofa, so he didn't really, get it. It was always me that. So I didn't have any of that actually. I did have one woman though who had, her husband had an affair herself, and she was happily remarried. And she came up to me when she found out, and she said, "Oh, he's been a naughty boy, hasn't he?" And then I found out from my other friends that she was merrily criticizing me for being upset, saying, "Oh, Sarah's such a misery." Oh, and this was someone that had been left with 4 very young children, and she was saying, "Oh, she's obsessed with it." I have seen both sides of it actually.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. And those people, a pox on them, that woman, a pox on her. I mean, if you can't find your empathy for somebody who got left with 4 small children, there is a vein of, I don't want like gallows humor or dark humor, but there's just the story, like your fish, like that they're so this sociopathic panache with which they do it, apropos of nothing in your life. It's just, hi, I'm leaving you. We interviewed a woman, was Jenny Ball, whose husband just said, she's cooking dinner. He's like, oh, by the way, I got an apartment. What do you want to watch on TV? It was like the next thing, like
that's it.
They're so, I can't even understand how you can be that gobsmackingly shallow. And I don't know. Have you untangled their skeins? Have you looked into like what makes people like this tick? Are they just really shallow? Are they trying to hurt you? Are they just
No, I'll tell you, I'll explain to you. But I have 10 hallmarks of wife abandonment syndrome, the 10 things that typically happen. Number 3 is the husband typically blurts out the news that the marriage is over out of the blue in the middle of a mundane domestic conversation.
Yes! Oh my God, it's a thing. It's like an average day at Chump Lady is number 3.
Yeah. Okay. So what's happened is that he's been toying with the idea. He's been thinking about it. Should I leave her? Shouldn't I leave her? Should I leave her? Shouldn't I leave her? And he's been thinking about it so long. And that when he finally blurts it out, he assumes that because you usually are tuned into what he needs. He assumes that what's been going on in his mind. Or as one of the women in the community said, he left me 6 months ago. He just forgot to tell me. That in his mind, like he'd already left her. And so he figures by the time he tells her, she should know what's going on because he's been thinking about it, so she should be aware. She should know what's in his mind.
Yeah.
What that reminds me of? Narcissistic. When children are really little, when they're toddlers, and they think that if they cover up their eyes and they can't see you
don't
can't
exist.
See them. And it almost feels like that. It's like going back to that very early stages of development where everything is about you, and they've never really got beyond that 2-year-old phase.
I love that, Sarah. That's perfect.
Well, I was thinking of the cliche, which it's one of the stupid shit cheaters say, which was the marriage was over a long time ago. I mean, like, as if like, then why were you here eating my dinner? Like, what? Why didn't I get the memo? Oh, really? Our marriage has been over for a long time.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, they're so predictable. I mean, they're so predictable that you have a syndrome. That's how predictable it is. And
I struggled with the word syndrome because I knew I'm a therapist, so I have to be precise, right? Because all the other therapists are going to say, wait a minute, that's not an actual syndrome. But then I figured it's a syndrome because it's so eerily replicable. Yeah. Like every woman comes in, like every man says, I can't do this anymore. Or they say, it's over. Like mine said, it's over. And they all say the same thing. And so it's like my 10 hallmarks of wife abandonment syndrome. It's like so cliche, it's like the same thing over and over and over again that I figured the word syndrome, that's appropriate. It's you can define it. Yeah.
And at Chump Lady, I call it one hell of a data set. I mean, you can see the manipulations over and over and over and over again, and people feel like freak of the week. But then you go, and I'm sure it's the same in your community, and you see that, oh my God, they said the exact same thing to you.
Yes.
And they pulled the same stunt. They tried to manipulate you in the same way. They blame shifted their terrible behavior onto you in the same way. It's very sadly predictable.
Yes.
On a more hopeful note, can you talk a bit about how people bounce back from this in your community? And I know you do retreats with folks, and they kind of get back on their feet and try to make friends and do all sorts of.
Yeah. So the community is like hugely supportive, and we have a very, very large Facebook group, which means that if it's 3:00 in the morning in California and you're heartbroken and you write in the Facebook group, somebody is awake somewhere in the world, maybe in Ireland or in China, really, literally it's worldwide. So you'll always have support day and night through the Facebook group. And then I run online group therapy, like a therapy group, a small group, 8 people. And then like this Saturday, I'm giving an online retreat that will work for everyone all across America and Europe. The timing wise, it's a full day retreat. But in terms of bouncing back, it really is, just sort of as Sarah said, it's a lot of different elements that you have to work through. Trusting again, recognizing your future, not blaming yourself, not listening to the voices of people who might, look down on you, and all of that stuff. And so it forces you to grow and work on yourself. And for those women who are up to the task, sometimes they feel as though, I could never have accomplished what I accomplished when I was married to my husband. So for example, after my husband left, a friend said, why don't you come join my women's barbershop chorus? And I'm like, women's barbershop chorus? Like, that's not my thing. Like, I'm from New York. Like, and I said, okay, sure. So I joined the chorus. And for 5 years, every Wednesday night, I'm standing on the risers, and we'd go to these conferences of barbershop choruses, and I'd wear a little tiara and a pink sequined costume. And I thought my husband would never have put up with this. He would have really looked down on this as really trivial. It's so stupid. Like, what are you doing? But now I could do whatever I wanted. So I was able to embrace my freedom and do what I wanted without hearing his critical voice, in the back of my head. And so many women really do go back to school or do something different or move somewhere or whatever. But with regard to the support of the communities, when people come to, like, every year I do a retreat in Sedona, Arizona, they come to the Sedona retreat, 12, 15 women, they develop friendships that are so profound that years and years afterwards, they're continuing to have reunions all over the place in each person's town. And I keep getting photographs of them in Texas with cowboy hats on.
Aww.
Or now they're in France together and they're in front of the Eiffel Tower, and the same groups develop this friendship. So they get this tremendous, powerful connection with these women who got their back and who totally understand what they're going through. And really, that's priceless.
Do you think, Vikki, that this journey starts with it being your biggest nightmare? The biggest nightmare is that they leave and that you're abandoned. And then you go forward in your journey, and your biggest nightmare is that they ever came back. I've had nightmares where I'm still married to my ex, and I've woken up thinking, oh, thank goodness it was a dream, it was a nightmare. and I think I think that must be a common theme, is that, well, that most people on this journey, they come out, it might not feel like it at the very beginning, but at the end of it, you emerge relieved and happy that they're gone.
Yeah, but like everything in life, and this is a part of what I try to teach people and try to remember myself, is that the obstacle is the way. The thing that gets in your way forces you to really love your life, to appreciate what you have. You don't want to sit around moaning about what you lost, because it's gone and you're not getting it back. And of course, you have to go through a grieving period. But then we have to turn our vision to the future and understand that him leaving forced you to learn how to be happy, how to get your own happiness and not have it be dependent on somebody else. And once you can do that, you're sort of bulletproof. Once you can really love life and welcome difficulties as, rather than as from the viewpoint of a victim, but see them as a challenge. Okay, how do I rebuild? And it doesn't matter where you're at or how little money you have, or, it doesn't matter, because it's really your mindset, how you're going to strengthen your mind and become courageous, and take any obstacle that you have in life as a challenge for you to grow.
That's beautiful. Speaking of obstacles in our path, we have a little segment that we call Fuckwit of the Week, Vikki, and we were wondering if you would weigh in on the Fuckwit of the Week.
Absolutely, a pleasure.
They're shameless, unreliable, and gobsmackingly entitled. It's Fuckwit of the Week.
Hi, Tracy and Sarah. One of my memorable fuckwit moments, of which there were several, was about a year into reconciliation, and I asked him why he still wanted to be married to me. And the only thing that he could come up with was that I was good at budgeting. And I accepted that at the time because of his health issues. He had a constant headache, so there was something going on. But yeah, so he didn't love me. I was useful.
Oh, that's a fuckwit.
Any reaction, Vikki?
Well, I mean, that's called damning with faint praise.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I think for her, that is really very valuable.
How so?
Because it gives her an insight into how limited his vision is of everything that she contributed to the relationship. And if that's all he could come up with, that really gives her a lot of information about, is this worth putting your blood, sweat, and tears into trying to save? Or, you know, when you're told that that's the best that he can think of in terms of what your value is, you know, then maybe it's time for you to think of other options rather than, you know, desperately trying to repair this marriage.
Maybe he really appreciates a good budget. I don't know. You know, maybe
give me that good budget.
Maybe he's that boring, and you need something more exciting than
You've got to question him, haven't you, for staying in a relationship when the best thing he was getting out of it was that someone was good at budgeting. You know, if you turn this round, you think, well, what's going on here? What was going on in that little head?
Yes. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah, exactly.
to me, I think what's also cruel about it, I mean, it kind of reminds me of your book tour bad news timing. It's that you're sitting here with bated breath, with good faith. You're sitting there at the therapist office. You're trying to work on this thing. You've been hurt. You're grieving. You're putting your heart out there. And to me, it's deliberately withholding. It's like, I know you're expecting to hear something, to feel seen. You know, you're a wonderful mother. You give so much. You know, I admire how you've handled your career, whatever it is, how you raise the children. You're waiting for those words. You're desperate for those words. And yeah, he damns with faint praise. You're good at budgeting.
Yes. Yeah. And can you imagine how her heart sank?
Oh, I absolutely can. I think anybody in either of our communities has been there.
Yes, absolutely.
It's time.
It hurts.
The moment you hear those words, so it's time to take those budgeting skills elsewhere, isn't it?
I'm going to be good at budgeting when we do our divorce.
Watch my budgeting skills go to work here with my attorney, you know, in financial discovery. Oh my God. I was sorry for the words she went through, and I'm glad that she saw that he didn't sufficiently appreciate her and dumped him and moved on.
Yeah.
Well, Vikki, can you tell us where we can find you, and where are you going to be next?
Okay. So the primary place is the website, which is Runaway Husbands, plural.com. And there are lots and lots of activities and opportunities. Some are free, some are low cost, some are, you know, like more the retreats are more the expensive end. But so if anyone recognizes this story or knows someone who has been through this, that would be the place to go. And then again, I'm going to show the book, Runaway Husbands. It just came out with a new edition.
Congratulations.
Last month. Thank you. And so the new edition has a chapter on co-parenting with an X if you have younger children. It has a chapter on the effect of a runaway husband on adult children, and a chapter on covert narcissism. So that's the primary place. That's where to find us.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That wraps another episode of Tell Me How You're Mighty. You want to leave us a mighty story or a Fuckwit of the Week submission? Check out our new website, tellmehowyourmighty.com. That's yours spelt YOURE. We've got all the episodes, show notes, links to our guests, and you can see the tea room where Sarah and I first met. If you enjoyed this episode, please review the podcast and follow us. Thanks. See you next week.